Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Hack, and in today's video you're checking out a brand new solo hybrid sorcerer build for the Elder Scrolls Online. That's right, you heard it correctly, a solo hybrid. I'm calling this my Battle Mage build because it's a pretty unique mix of two-handed skills along with elemental magic abilities for a really fun and different play style. As a sorcerer, we have strong shields, we have great heals over time, and we have very strong damage and passives. We have speed as well. So this ends up being just a very fun build. As usual, we'll go over these stats. We'll go over some gear set options, talk about skills, champion points. We'll cover the outfit style and more coming up next. All right, so here we are on the solo hybrid sorcerer build. Been working on this one for quite a while, and I'm pretty pleased with how it's turned out. We've got the lightning staff back bar, of course. Got the big two-hand front bar. Pretty interesting combination of the physical damage type as well as the lightning elemental type because we are a sorcerer, of course. So let me go ahead and buff up here a little bit, and then we'll jump into the basic stats on the build. Go ahead and use a potion as well. Keeping in mind this is a hybrid build, so it's going to be different than a pure DPS build. We have to split our stats quite a bit, so we'll talk about that. So coming in at about 22,000 max magicka, 20k max health, almost 26,000 max stamina. Of course, we are splitting our resource pools to make that happen. 900 magic recovery, 500 health recovery, 1,100 stamina recovery. For our base weapon and spell damage, they are the same since we are a hybrid setup. Looking at about 3,700 with our crit surge buff active. Now we also have two additional buffs. We've got the Berserker enchant on our back bar, an infused Berserker enchant, plus we are running another weapon damage set. So that will get us very close to 5,000 weapon and spell damage. Let me see if I can proc both of those just so you can kind of see here. Did I get it? There you go. 4958 weapon and spell damage. So very solid overall. I'll even give you a few options if you want to increase that further. You definitely can do that. Now, as far as our resistances, this is a medium armor setup, so the resistances are not that huge, about 18,000 spell and physical resist, but I am using multiple damage shields. I have 3 damage shields that I'm running right now on this hybrid sorcerer. I'm not even using Ice Heart. I decided not to use that on this particular setup. So just with what I have, I'm able to get well over 20k in damage shields. Actually, you know what? I take it back. There's 4 damage shields on this build, and it's not even running Ice Heart. So we'll talk about that in a minute, but that certainly helps a lot in terms of the survivability. Now, in terms of your attributes, because this is a hybrid, you are using magicka and stamina. You want to split these fairly evenly. So I've got 30 points into magicka, 34 points into max stamina. I'm using tri-stat food. That's going to be your best bet on this. Currently using the purple tri-stat food, though of course you can run the gold Bewitched Sugar Skulls for even more stats, as well as close to 1,000 health recovery. So if you have access to that, I definitely recommend that food. Otherwise, the purple food is just fine. The Lover Mundus is going to be ideal for your hybrid build. That's because this is basically 2 Mundus stones in one. It's giving us 4,200 spell and physical penetration combined. So this is going to be ideal for making your hybrid skills do more damage. We've got minor protection on the front bar. We'll talk about how we get there in a minute. In terms of the race here, I did decide to go with REDGUARD, and that's really just to help with the stamina sustain, with some changes to off balance, how that works coming up in Harrow Storm. Sustain is a little bit trickier on the stamina builds, especially on the hybrid setup. I'm not running any recovery, so what I do like is the cost reduction here that the REDGUARD has. They have that 8% cost reduction on weapon abilities, and this actually works with our back bar ultimate, which we'll talk about as well. So I do like that passive a lot. You also get conditioning that gives us extra max stamina. It's always good. And then this really helps with sustain as well. When we deal direct damage, we get that 950 stamina back every 5 seconds. That does help a lot because we're running a lot of those stamina skills, those weapon skills, on our front bar to do both single target and AoE damage. So I do recommend REDGUARD for the hybrid setup. Of course, you could get more damage if you went with something like Orc. That would be very good for damage. You'd also get some healing. You could run Dark Elf as well for the damage and the max stats. Really, you can make anything work. I just thought REDGUARD was a nice option here as far as sustaining the build. In terms of those potions, good old tri-stat potions, those will be your best in slot for this particular setup. And I think that covers all the basics. So let's go ahead and jump into the item sets next. Starting off with our first 5-piece set. I went with something that would really amp up my weapon damage on this build, as well as give me some good crit and some good healing. I have never used this on a hybrid setup yet, so I thought this would be fun. So I'm trying out the Briarheart 5-piece set. This comes from the Hrothgar DLC. And so I'm running this 3 pieces on the jewelry and 2 pieces on the body. It's a pretty nice set overall. It did get buffed. It is getting a buff, in fact, in the Harrowstorm DLC coming out in a couple weeks. So let me show you that. It's got weapon crit on the 2-piece, max stamina on the 3-piece, weapon crit again on the 4-piece, and for the 5-piece, when you deal critical damage, you have a 25% chance to increase your weapon damage by 450 for 10 seconds. And while that's active, your critical strikes heal you for about 378 health. And there is a 5-second cooldown on that heal. So overall, the stats are great, even just for a pure stamina sorcerer. If you're looking for ideas for a stamina pure sorcerer build, then Briarheart is very good for that as well. You can see you have a lot of weapon critical, and sorcerers really excel when you build for critical because that is tied to your healing. So the crit is great, the stamina is good. But then I wanted to really amp up that weapon damage, and the weapon damage 450 there for 10 seconds is very nice. Now, not only that, but I am running 3 infused weapon damage enchants. So I'm getting just tons and tons of weapon damage from the set overall. So I've got the infused neck and 2 infused rings there. So as you can see, getting quite a lot of weapon damage overall out of this set. And then it's just an easy set to get. You can farm these pieces yourself. From the Hrothgar DLC, if you have access to that, or they're pretty common on guild traders as well. So definitely recommend that for any type of sorcerer build. Definitely check it out. Like I mentioned here, I am running 2 pieces on the body as well. So I've got the Briarheart Bracers in Divines. That's with a max stamina enchant. And I've got the Briarheart Belt, also in Divines, also with the max stamina enchant. And you may be thinking, well, that's weapon damage. You know, this is supposed to be a hybrid build. What about your spell damage? Well, of course I have that covered with Palinals. It's kind of the go-to hybrid setup. Basically, the way it works is you build up either one resource or the other. You either build up really high weapon damage or really high spell damage, and you can check out what the 5-piece here does on Palinals. Your spell and weapon damage become the highest of both values. So essentially, with this build, I'm building up my weapon damage as high as possible, and then the Palinal set is going to transfer that over to spell damage, making my weapon and spell damage equal. So basically, the higher the weapon damage, the better. This also gives us a nice bit of health, which is great for soloing. Gives us the 2 recoveries there, which is also helpful. So yes, just a really good overall set for solo hybrid builds in general. Definitely want to check that out. It is 9 traits to craft, so it can be a little bit difficult to complete. If you're not able to get that, try to find a crafter, maybe in your guild or something, who can craft it for you, because you can use this on tons of hybrid builds. I've used it on my Dragon Knight hybrid, for example. I've used it on a Templar hybrid build. So even if you get like a full set, you can reuse this on a lot of builds, and it is really fun. So in terms of our weights and traits here, 3 pieces on the body, and then 2 pieces on the weapon. So I've got the heavy chest here. Chest, I did go with the tri-stat enchant just to get some extra health on this build. That is Divines. Then I've got the heavy legs, so just trying to maximize both my health and my resources a little bit here. Divines there as well with the tri-stat enchant. And then medium boots, also Divines with the max stamina. The way this works out is I am using 2 pieces of heavy and 5 pieces of medium on this build. So 5 medium overall, that's going to amp up our weapon damage even more. We'll talk about that when we get to the passives. In terms of our weapons, I am running the Greatsword. Greatsword remains the best option for a hybrid build if you're going with 2-hand on the front bar. That's because this increases both our weapon and spell damage with that Nirnhoned enchant. You can see 1806 is the damage on that. Really, really good for hybrids. Now I decided to go with a hardening enchantment here. That just gives me an extra damage shield every 5 seconds, though this does have a 5-second cooldown. But I felt like this was just enough kind of to get me over the edge and make the build a little bit more survivable. It is medium armor, so it makes it a lot tankier. Now, if you're getting stuck with this a little bit and you want to make this build even stronger as far as survivability, the other option you can run, that would be switching over to an infused trait on your greatsword. That gives you a much higher damage shield. You can see over 5,000 point damage shield. And because this is infused, it actually refreshes itself every 5 seconds. So it's up 100% of the time on this build. Definitely a good alternative if you just want more shields. But of course, being a sorcerer, we have shields via our skills as well. So I decided just to go with more damage. So I'm using the Nirnhond for now. But I can switch back and forth if I want. So that, of course, being two-handed, that gives us basically 2 pieces there of Palinals. Then also running 2 pieces on the back through the lightning staff. So I wanted to really think about adding that elemental damage here on my sorcerer, because we do get bonuses both for physical and elemental damage types. This lets me run Wall of Lightning on the back bar. I can get some really good sustain with a lightning heavy attack for my Magicka pool. And it just looks really, really cool. So running the lightning staff there. This is infused with that weapon and spell damage enchant that ends up being closer to 600 weapon and spell damage every 5 seconds. So it is excellent for boosting your hybrid stats. So we've got the Palinals, we've got the Briarheart, we've got all our stats scaling up through the Palinals weapon and spell damage. As far as your monster helm, completely open to what you want. Now, as I mentioned in the intro, I wanted more of like a battle mage kind of feel. I wanted something kind of fun and offensive that I was going to get up a lot. So I went with something different. That's going to be Infernal Guardian. This comes from City of Ash 1, I believe. And pretty interesting set. It gives you max magicka. And when you apply a damage shield, you have a 50% chance to create these flame mortars. They attack the furthest enemy from you. They deal about 7,500 flame damage in an AoE, and there's 3 of them. So that ends up being, what, a little bit over 20,000 damage when this monster set procs every 6 seconds. I like it. It's really fun. It's kind of an RP thing where I just wanted some extra elemental damage to go on my battle mage, basically. You don't have to use it, but I think it's really interesting to play around with on the sorcerer build. What you find is you can obviously proc this with your sorcerer damage shield. That'll proc that flame damage. But you can also proc it with your brawler damage shield, and you can proc it with your infused or Nirnhond damage shield glyph on the front bar as well. So it adds some pretty fun flavor to the build. Now, like I said, you don't have to do that. You can run something as basic as maybe 2 weapon damage pieces. You could run, like I have here, 1 piece of armor and 1 piece of weapon damage with something like Molokina and Lord Warden. Whatever pieces you have can go well here. Stormfist is another nice option that gives you physical and lightning damage. Another great option for the sorcerer. But as you'll see in some of the gameplay, I am using damage shields so much that I do get a good bit of damage from the Infernal Guardian set, and it's just really fun. It looks cool. So that covers the sets. I think I mentioned it. 5 medium. It's going to give us the most weapon damage possible, and then 2 heavy just for the extra defensives and extra health. Ideally, you want to maximize your armor here with a heavy chest and heavy legs, both being Palinal. That would be how to get the most resistances from the build. And in terms of enchants, I am using tri-stat enchants on my big pieces. So tri-stat head, chest, and legs. That will give you the most stamina, magicka, and health, and then everything else max stamina. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into the skills next. Starting with our front bar, two-hander, this is going to be Reverse Slice. That is from the two-hand skill line. It's the second to last ability that you get, and it does AoE splash damage. Now, the other morph gives you more single target damage, but when you're soloing, especially your way through a dungeon, clearing through trash mobs, you really want the extra AoE splash damage. It's really excellent. The cost is low, and it does scale up and do bonus damage the lower health your enemy is. So really, really good for this build. Second ability, of course, we have the solo staple build, which is going to be Brawler. You can see that is the third skill you get in the two-handed skill line. Does very good AoE damage, gives us a nice damage shield, over 5k at base, and then it actually scales up with each enemy hit. So up to 300% if you have more enemies around you. You can get quite a large shield from this. You can see the cost is not bad. Of course, I am a red guard, I have some cost reduction. So this is a nice AoE spammable, and it protects you at the same time. And of course, it is a damage shield, so it can proc Infernal Guardian, which is pretty cool. Third ability, we've got Harden Ward, and this is actually a damage shield from the Sorcerer class. Comes from the DAEDRIC summoning skill line. It's the second to last ability that you get. And I actually like this. I think it's a pretty good tooltip for a hybrid build. You can see the cap on Harden Ward and most damage shields is 60% of your health. So I'm just underneath cap, and I barely have any max magicka. This scales up with your max magicka. You can see on this build, I only have 22,000 max magicka, but I'm still able to get right underneath that cap, which would be 12k damage shield. That's pretty good for a hybrid build. It adds a lot of protection to your build. Of course, this can proc Infernal Guardian as well, which is even better. And it gives me a nice magicka source of protection. On my front bar, I've got Brawler for that shield. Then I can combine that with my Hardened Ward. I even have a passive damage shield. You can see I'm well over my health cap with damage shields on this build, even without using a set like Iceheart, which is really nice. So definitely recommend that for your defensives on your front bar. Next up, we got another two-hand ability. This is the two-handed spammable Dizzy Swing. This does pretty good single target damage. Has a low cost, which is what you need on a hybrid setup. And it also sets your enemy off balance for 7 seconds. While they're off balance, you can smash them with a nice heavy attack and get double the stamina sustain back. So that's really good. Last but not least, I'm using Barbed Trap. This is a flex spot. The reason why I like Barbed Trap, this is from the Fighters Guild skill line, by the way, last ability here from the Fighters Guild. I like that this gives us a very good single target dot. You can see there, unbuffed even on the hybrid. That's a good tool tip. The cost is low. It gives us the minor force buff, so that increases our critical damage, which is excellent. And also gives us some passive weapon damage from the Fighters Guild skill line through the Slayer passive. So this is an excellent just all-around ability on your front bar. You can lay this down, single target or AoE, get that minor force buff, do some dot damage. It's all good. Now you may consider putting something else here. This would be a good slot if you really need an extra heal. You could run Rally from the two-hand skill line in this place. If you're doing pure AoE damage, and you want a little bit more AoE damage through something like Minor Berserk, then you can also run Camouflage Hunter in this spot. If you want more healing, you can run something like Structured Entropy. There's really a lot that you can put in this position, but most of the time I am using Barbed Trap, like I mentioned. Now for our ultimate, we are using the Psijic Order Temporal Guard, and this remains probably one of the best front bar ultimates for soloing in ESO. And the reason is really simple. You're never going to cast this. The reason why you like it is it gives you minor protection passively. So that's 8% damage reduction. Any damage that you take is going to be reduced by this passive. Of course, you could run other things here. Like if you're just doing basic dungeons and you don't really care about reducing damage at all, throw on something like, I don't even have it morphed. Fighters Guild. You could do Dawnbreaker, either version. You could do Flawless Dawnbreaker. That would scale up your weapon damage well over 6,000 probably with Flawless on the front bar. So you can run other things here, but just, I think if you want to do dungeons solo, specifically veteran dungeons or world bosses, then you really want to get Temporal Guard. That, of course, is from the Psijic Order, so you will need the Somerset chapter to unlock that. Now onto the back bar, which is our Lightning Staff. We've got Liquid Lightning. So I wanted to focus again on that elemental side of the sorcerer. So we've got good AoE damage here, shock damage. This is one of your sorcerer skills. It comes from the Stormcalling skill line. That is the third ability that you get. I recommend the Liquid Lightning morph for soloing because it just lasts longer. And to go with that AoE lightning damage, we're of course running Blockade of Storms, giving us AoE lightning damage as well. This comes from Destruction Staff. That is the second ability that you unlock. And you always want either Elemental Blockade, or if you happen to be running Bow, you want Endless Hail for a hybrid build. The reason why is these two skills, Endless Hail and Elemental Blockade, those are the best uptimes for your Berserker enchant. That gives you, if you have an Infused Staff or Infused Bow, well over 600 weapon and spell damage. That's really going to make your hybrid do a lot more damage, so it feels more effective than if you didn't have that. So I definitely recommend this. The damage really is not great. But it looks cool, and it's giving us that very important Berserker enchant. So that's why we have it here on the back bar. Now next up we have Elemental Drain. This is the second to last ability you get from the Destruction Staff skill line. And this reduces our enemy's spell resistance by 50 to 80. So that's making those elemental attacks hit harder. This even makes Infernal Guardian hit harder, of course, because that's elemental damage as well. And not only that, it's giving us Minor Magicka Steal, which really, this is helping us sustain the Magicka side of the build, guys. This is giving us 300 Magicka back every 1 second. That's equivalent to about 600 Magicka recovery on your stat sheet. That's what's helping you sustain those abilities like Blockade and Liquid Lightning, because they are a bit expensive. If I wasn't running this, I wouldn't be able to maintain those. So it is really good for the sustain. And then because we're a red guard, we get the stamina sustain from the race. So it kind of works out well. Next up, we have Hurricane from the Sorcerer skill line. Also from Storm Calling, this is the second ability you get. Morph it to Hurricane, that is the stamina morph. Why do we prefer Hurricane over Lightning form, which is the Magicka morph? Well, Hurricane just does a bit more damage, I think. This ramps up. It does more damage the longer you have it up. So if you have it up the full 15 seconds, it's doing 150% more damage. Plus, it does give you minor... what's that buff called? Minor Expedition. So you can move around a lot faster for the full duration. So I prefer that. And last up, of course, we have our heal and our offensive buff from Crit Surge. Crit Surge comes from Storm Calling as well. It's the second to last ability you get here. Crit Surge is your go-to morph for the hybrid. In this case, it's giving you weapon and spell damage increased by 20% for 33 seconds. It's also healing you for a solid 3,300 every 1 second. This is our main heal on the build. As long as you're critting, you will get that heal to come in. The heal can crit as well, close to 5,000 health every 1 second. So in most encounters, I don't need anything else. I just get my crit heal coming in every 1 second from Crit Surge. I just keep my damage shields up so my enemy can't really get to my health very well either. And that usually is plenty. But like I said, you can run Rally on the front bar. If you absolutely need a burst heal, then that's where I would put that. And then last up, for the ultimates, I just went full on with that elemental battle mage kind of feel, using the Thunderous Rage ultimate. This is from the Destruction Staff. That is the Destro ultimate. Taking the Elemental Rage morph, this just gives us a longer lasting effect. Thunderous Rage increases the duration by 2 seconds. So you have a 9-second ultimate there, dealing over 7k damage per second. So pretty good. Notice that the cost is reduced. I think this is something like $225 at base. And because I'm a red guard, they actually get cost reduction of all weapon ultimates, even Magicka-based weapon ultimates. So that's a pretty cool combination in my opinion. So I think we can go over the passives really quickly as well, because you can probably save a few skill points here. As far as Dark Magic, we're actually not using any Dark Magic abilities on the build. I did experiment with Crystal Fragments on the front bar that you could kind of play around with, but I wasn't casting enough magic abilities on that front bar for it really to be useful. So you could drop some of these. I mean, Unholy Knowledge is excellent. You do want that, of course. Blood Magic, you don't need this. We're not using any Dark Magic skills. Persistence, though, is good because you get some reduced cost after blocking, and you could drop Exploitation as well. Now, under Daedric Summoning, this is good. Rebate can give you some Magicka back if you're using that Atronach ultimate. Power Stone is excellent. That gives us even further cost reduction on our Fiery Rage on that Destruction Staff ultimate. So we've got this combined with the Red Guard passive. We're getting that ultimate up pretty fast. Daedric Protection, this does give you extra stamina and health recovery for slotting these abilities. So for example, on the front bar, we have 20% bonus stam and health recovery because we have Hardened Ward there. Expert Summoner, you would make use of this if you are using the Atronach ultimate, otherwise you won't. Some people think you get that from having Ward slotted, but you don't. It's only a pet. And then under Storm Calling, you definitely want all of these. These are great. Capacitor increases your magic recovery by 10%. Energize increases our physical and shock damage, so that's amping both of our sources of damage here on the Battle Mage setup. Amplitude gives us bonus damage, and Expert Mage gives us weapon and spell damage, so all of those very good. Under Two-Handed, you definitely want all of these. Some of the best ones here, for example, Heavy Weapons, that does give us 6% bonus damage. That's on all of our abilities, so both stamina and magicka. That's one reason, probably the main reason why I will run two-handed swords over something like an axe or a maul. This just gives us the most benefit for both sides of the hybrid setup. Of course, Balance Blade is excellent as well, reduces the cost of those two-hand abilities. Instruction Staff, yes, get all of these. Those are all very, very good passives. Now, this is primarily a medium armor build, so we're using medium and heavy armor. You want all of your medium armor passives for sure. You get a good amount of weapon critical, which is great. It helps proc actually that crit surge skill, which we talked about. Windwalker is great for that recovery, that cost reduction. Actually, I take it back. You do not need this passive. If you're not sneaking, you can save 2 points by not using the improved sneak passive. Agility, though, this is where it's at. You must use the agility passive because, again, we're stacking up weapon damage with Briarheart, with those infused weapon damage enchants on the jewelry, with the 15% extra weapon damage that we get from this. That's why you can have basically 5k or more weapon and spell damage from this passive, so make sure you pick that up. Now, heavy armor, I have all of these, but you do not actually benefit from all of these. So if you're running this like me, you have just 2 pieces of heavy. You only want the first 3 passives. That's Resolve, Constitution, and Juggernaut. These last 2 you will not get any benefit from because we're not going with 5 pieces of heavy. Under Fighters Guild, you do want Slayer passive. We talked about that. Intimidating Presence, this also reduces the cost of that Barb Trap if you happen to be using that. Banish the Wicked, you get some ultimate back when killing undead, so that's very good as well. Mage's Guild, we're not really using those, so you can go ahead and skip that. Psijic Order, the most important passive in Psijic Order. I haven't talked about this yet on this build, but it's one of my favorites. It's called Concentrated Barrier. This gives us a damage shield every time we block. When we have one of those Psijic Order abilities slotted, of course we have the ultimate slotted on the front bar. This is one of the best tricks for soloing bosses, you guys. Have undo that Temporal Guard ultimate. When you're about to get slammed with a huge boss heavy attack, just block. And that's going to take up a good portion of that incoming heavy attack and burn it off on your damage shield instead. You can see with my CP that I've used here, actually getting a pretty good damage shield. I'm getting 6,200 damage shield just by blocking. That's excellent. Undaunted, of course, if you have this, you want to pick up Undaunted Metal. Yeah, I'm getting 4% extra health, magicka, and stamina for using that passive. Assault and support, I'm actually not using any of these, so you don't need to PvP at all on this build if you don't want to. Of course, we are using all the racial skills. You need all of those. As well as alchemy, medicinal use. That's going to make your potions last longer. So let's talk champion points next. Now, on this setup, the champion point distribution is a little bit unique. Overall, CP points are difficult to do on hybrid builds. It is a challenge to make this work because you basically have to split your points to make it work for both magicka and stamina-based skills. So it is a little bit tricky. But here's what I came up with. So 34 into Warlord, 8 into Sprinter, 30 into Tenacity. You can get a lot of good sustain from those heavy attacks. 43 Healthy, 43 Arcanist, 43 Mooncalf. You can see we're pretty split on recoveries. Then 40 into Shadow Ward, 28 into Tumbling. In the blue tree, this is where it starts to get a little bit weird. I've got 43 into Elemental Expert. I am not doing anything into Spell Erosion. That's simply because I'm using Elemental Drain, so I already get a 50-80 spell penetration. I'm also using the Lover. So that's about as good as it's going to get. And the reason why I do that, you'll see in a minute, I've got 56 into Master Arms. I put actually 67 into Piercing, and that's because I do not have Major Fracture. That's one of the problems with hybrids is sometimes you don't have both of those debuffs. I have Major Breach, I don't have Major Fracture, so I have to put a lot of points into Piercing to make up for that and make my penetrations about equal, but I think it works in this case. I've also got 61 into Thaumaturge. That's going to help our Lightning Wall, our Lightning Splash, all those damage over times, even Barb Trap. Those are going to get scaled up a lot by that. And then 43 into Mighty just to increase our physical damage. 72 Ironclad. That's very important for absorbing some of those boss attacks. 43 into Hardy, 43 Elemental Defender, 31 Thick-Skinned. And this is the money right here, you guys. 81 into Bastion. If you have those points left over, I definitely recommend you put those in. Because as you saw, that's a huge buff to all of our damage shields, I have a total of 4 shields on this build, and it's scaling all of those up by 24%. So it's really good. Like you saw, I mean, we're running the Magicka base Hardened Ward on basically a build with no max Magicka, and I'm still at the cap. The reason I can do that is from the Bastion CP node right here. So that's about it in terms of champion points. I know people always want to know the outfit style. So in armor styles, I'm using a motif called Moon Priest, New Moon Priest, excuse me. Using the light New Moon Priest helm, have the light New Moon Priest jerkin. For legs, I actually have the heavy New Moon Priest legs. Shoulders, I am using the Prophet Shawl for the shoulders, and then just New Moon Priest hands, waist, and feet, I believe. And that is it. All right, everybody, and with that, we're going to wrap up the solo hybrid sorcerer battle mage build. As usual, I've got some bonus footage here at the end taking on a boss, so make sure you check that out if you're interested in seeing more about how the build plays and performs. I hope you guys liked this one. It was really a lot of fun to put together. As always, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to crush that like button. It really helps out the channel. Let me know what you think in the comments section below. And if you're not subscribed to the channel yet, make sure you hit that subscribe button as well. I do build videos, guides, and discussions here every week on the channel. So definitely check that out. As always, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a great day, and I will see you around in the next video.